Welcome. Hi, everybody. Today we are going to have a tea time talk with me, Louise May. I'm editor at Lee & Low, and with one of my favorite authors, Monica Brown. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Louise. Hi, everybody.
This week, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of Monica's award-winning picture book, Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match, which introduced her iconic character, Marisol McDonald. And I'm going to just do a little screen share here. Yay, happy 10th anniversary, Marisol McDonald.
Thank you so much.
I think it's kind of amazing that it's been 10 years since this spunky little mismatched Marisol came into our lives with the publication of the first book in the series, which was Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match. As evidence from the cover, Marisol is a girl who has her own way of doing things. What made you want to write about a character such as Marisol, Monica? What inspired you?
Well, there is some elision between her and I. First of all, thank you for inviting me to celebrate Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match, Marisol McDonald No Combina, illustrated by Sarah Palacios and translated by Adriana Dominguez. I am honored to be here working and chatting, I guess I'm used to working with you, Louise, but getting to actually chat with you here with my longtime editor. We have so many books together and one coming out that's super special to me and will be kind of a bookend with Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match. I had so many reasons to want to write this story. They were very personal as someone who is multi-ethnic, mixed race, bicultural, multicultural, and I became a mom. I had children. I grew up without seeing stories of families like mine represented. And I wrote this book. In part, it was spurred by something negative, a comment made at a family wedding by someone who was unrelated about how our family people didn't match and their names didn't match, like Monica Brown or Marisol McIntosh, etc., things like that. And so my cousins and I laughed about it, but really it reflected what was a reality to me. And that is growing up with the sense that if you were the child of two cultures, you were often described in fractions and even participated in it. I'm half Latina, or I'm a quarter Jewish and a quarter Catholic, etc. And I thought to myself, it's not a comfortable whole place for children to reside, because I don't believe children should be described in fractions. I think in Walt Whitman's terms, we contain multitudes, and I wanted to celebrate wholeness and the beauty of a multi-ethnic family. I also wanted to write this book to give children who sometimes were, placed on the metaphorical island of misfit toys, a place to be themselves, to celebrate being different. Marisol has a unique, beautiful perspective on the world. She's a nonconformist, and why not celebrate that? I think children in some ways can be pushed towards conformity. And if you're different, that's given a negative spin. And I wanted to intervene in that. And so instead of Marisol being forced to fit into a particular box, either if it has to do with her creative vision or her multicultural self, that instead the folks around her might learn from her. And I wanted children who read it to take heart, that to be themselves and have the courage to do so.
So you mentioned that we've done several books together, but I was not the editor on the first book, Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match. Marisol joined the Lee & Low family in November of 2011 when it was published. At the time, Lee & Low purchased the Children's Book Press, which was the original publisher of the book. So maybe you could tell us, I know the book had an interesting path to publication, so maybe you could just, kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I am so pleased that you asked that question, Louise, because I think if they're teachers or writers watching, they'll understand why it's so important to support all types of presses, big five presses that have a wide reach, independent presses that have independent visions, and small presses. And this is a journey that exemplifies why that's so important. This book was actually under contract with a really large publisher. It was my first big multi-book deal, and it was a wonderful, beautiful opportunity to me that turned out great. But the vision I had for the book wasn't matching the editorial vision at that publisher. And at the time, if you can believe it, writing about being mixed race and talking about things like skin color and the way we label or exclude each other, and maybe even a little bit of feeling bullied into being something you're not, was not as common as it even is today. And today it's not outrageously common. I still think sometimes both the publishing world, as with our communities, are unsure how to treat multiracial, multi-ethnic characters, even though it's a huge and beautiful reality demographically. And so I withdrew this book from publication, even though I was a brand new writer. I think I had maybe 2 books out. I had the courage to say, you know, I am going to stick to my vision for this book. And I submitted another that was really a wonderful collaboration with my big established publisher. But then I had this little book, I call it the little book that could, because it really was roundly rejected for all sorts of reasons. And folks thought it was very controversial potentially, which in retrospect, I don't think any of them would say that now. It's actually a beautiful, affirming, joyful book about a beautiful child, in my slightly biased opinion. And so my agent, Stephanie von Borstel, my early partner in my publishing career, she submitted to a small nonprofit publisher, which is increasingly rare, really, unless you're talking about academic presses, Children's Book Press. And it was amazing. It was a meeting of minds, and I got to put back some of the things that folks had wanted me to take out in the book. It was just wonderful. But of course, like so many small publishers, there was a huge economic crisis, and my book might have been lost. But Lee and Low, I guess, mid-sized publisher, independent publisher, acquired the beautiful children's book imprint, the radical, the visionary, and with it, Marisol McDonald. And I believe this book might have been the only book that came out that particular season from this new imprint with you, Louise, sort of overseeing. And it was an effort of me, you know, a group effort to mail to competitions, et cetera, to get this book out into the world. And then once Marisol arrived, she really, really made a beautiful splash and connected with readers. And that's like the dream. But I wouldn't have had that chance to connect were it not for this small nonprofit publisher, and were it not for Lee and Low.
We're really happy and delighted that we've been able to take care of Marisol for the last 10 years. And we have felt that, you know, we start to feel, well, you know, Marisol needs to go on a few more adventures. So let's see what we can come up with here. So in 2013, the first book was joined by Marisol McDonald and the Clash Bash. And then in 2016, with the publication of Marisol McDonald and the Monster. And I don't read the Spanish titles, I apologize, but I don't speak Spanish. So I would just mangle the language if I tried to say them, but I'm sure Monica will do that. So among all the characters that you've created, you've written so many books. What makes Marisol special? I know you've talked about a little bit of that, but what are some of her most endearing and positive traits and characteristics? I think we could go through some examples from each one of the books. So let's start with.
Sure. I guess overarching, I think one of Marisol McDonald's superpowers, if you will, is her creativity, her imagination. I think that's in general the superpower that children retain. I would like them to retain it into, not retain, that most children have this power of their mind being open and the world of the imaginary and the fantasy being more present in everyday life and the fanciful, in an ideal world where they're allowed to explore that. So I think creativity is one of Marisol's superpowers. And I think that that goes along with the idea of being a nonconformist in a sense, because, you know, it gives individual agency for children to sort of imagine their own lives or take their own paths, even when they're young, to explore roads that might be uniquely their own. So we can talk about that in relation to the book specifically. And I have some fun stories about it, I think.
Okay, so let's start then with the first book, Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match. And here are two spreads from the interior of the book. You can talk about these or other things, whatever you like.
Well, sure. This is where I established the character of Marisol McDonald, and she has a fabulous sense of style and loves color and wildness and gets teased about her clothes sometime. She also has very unique perspectives on doing art in art class. And she doesn't understand why, you know, princesses can't be soccer players and why they, you know, why she has to keep between the lines, if we want to say that. And so this is sort of a journey of her exploring that. And even her teacher early on corrects her because she likes to write part of her name, Marisol, in cursive and then part of it in print, McDonald. And our teacher says, we don't use both at the same time. But one moment I love about this as a teacher for decades now is that the teacher, when she sees how hard Marisol is trying to fit in at the expense of her sense of self and empowerment, writes her a note and she signs her name Ms. Tamiko Apple in cursive and print, because we know that teachers learn from children. I learn from my students every day and students learn from teachers. So I liked that opening up of that relationship. And I like how when she finally gets her puppy in the end, and when he cuddles with her, she says, that kind of sounds like he purrs. I love that she names him Kitty, because it's part of her internal logic that is worth not only respecting, but celebrating when it comes to creativity in that way.
Okay, that's right. Now, let's go on for the next book. Let me find that. Okay, so now from Marisol McDonald and the Clash Bash.
Yes, Marisol McDonald y la fiesta sin igual. And this is interesting because, you know, Marisol's having a birthday and she goes and wants to have a birthday party, and all of her friends, you know, state their opinions. Somebody wants a soccer party, somebody wants a princess party, someone wants a, you know, different kind of party. And she thinks about it and she goes to the store and she realizes, why can't everyone express the self they enjoy? So she makes unique, one of a kind invitations for each child, and they come back and they all come dressed as what they feel like doing. Like, we don't have to conform to others' ideas of fun. And yet one thing that's sort of beautiful during the party is as they play, their costumes get mismatched and they all sort of enjoy a part of each other's self-expression. This is a beautiful book to me because it is also tied to my family in Peru, because it's a challenge, because the person she most wants to be at the party is her abuelita in Peru, and she just can't come for economic and different realities. But in an ending that sort of is an introduction in a way to this new technological world, she does get to see her abuelita on Zoom. And we don't have that image, but that image, the smiling face, I sent Sara Palacios a picture of my mother, my children's abuelita, and her smile is inspired by my own mother, Isabel Maria's smile. So it's a little bit about this book.
That was
Marisol learns and has fun.
that was the picture you just described. It was Zoom, before we all knew what Zoom was.
Exactly. It was before everyone knew about Zoom. It was sort of a anticipating our new lives,
I guess, or something.
communicating with our loved ones, except for it's economic and visa issues that keep Marisol's abuelita from coming. So.
Okay, so now we can go on to the third book. Whoops, there we go. Marisol McDonald and the Monster. I love that.
El Monstro.
I love that monster.
It's interesting because in a way, this is Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match might be one of my favorite books of all time because it was so close to my heart. But this is a book that the concept, the writing of it was so delightful because, it hasn't, of course, gotten the attention Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match has, but to me, it's one of the most important books I've ever written because guess what? Imaginative, creative kids have the opportunity to do, to imagine things in ways that are scary or make them anxious. And I'm going to share an anecdote. I don't know if you remember this, Louise, but we went back and forth a little because I wanted Marisol to be afraid of the quote monster under the bed. And there was concern about like, how long do those fears last? So we debated and I talked about it. It's also a metaphor. And I sent you a link to Rihanna's and Eminem's Monster Under the Bed song, which was trending. And so I thought and I think I also sent some articles because as any of my editors know, I can be tenacious when I feel really passionate about something. And so the point is, Marisol can't sleep because she keeps hearing like bumps and noises under the night and she gets so afraid. And in her mind, you can see Sara Palacios' delightful monster, which really isn't that scary, but she's worried about it. And she has conversations with each family member about, are monsters real? And the point is not that are they real or not, because the monster she's imagining is not real, but the fact that they exist in our imagination can make us scared anyways. So in terms of Marisol with supportive parents, and I love that her family is a beautiful, whole, multi-ethnic family, she realizes that, well, I'm going to use my imagination to solve this. So she decides that she will make a nice monster, Melody, and she will put Melody in a box. You can see in the illustration, it says Mi Casa under her bed. So that way she'll know there's a monster under her bed when she goes to sleep, but it'll be a nice monster. So I love that idea of working things out through creativity, because I certainly do with my art, clearly with my children's books. I wanted to write a book for a child that was very creative, and that creativity and imagination could lead to anxiety, as it sometimes does if our minds are really active. So meanwhile, she's tried to convince her family to let Kitty the puppy sleep with her so that she's safe, but they're like, no, he belongs such and such. So anyways, everything is fine. And yet she wakes up to bumps in the night, even with Melody underneath her bed. So her parents, they all hear it finally, not just her. And they discover that it is Kitty who's bouncing a ball in the kitchen downstairs that she's been hearing all along. So the last image of the book is her asleep, and both Melody, the nice monster, and Kitty is now sleeping under the bed. And so the parents were flexible too in this case, like, well, why not? I guess Kitty does belong up there because Kitty's going to keep us all awake anyways. So that's a little bit about that book.
Yeah, I do remember that whole conversation. Well, it was more than a conversation about at what age do kids not or stop believing in monsters. And Yes, you said you convinced me.
Thank you.
And yes, and we never went back. We went forward from that.
Which
So
is also what I love about working with you, Louise and Lee and Lo, and being able to feel like I participate so fully in the creative process, which is not entirely rare, but special. So that's why it's extra fun here to be celebrating this book that had a tough time finding a publisher and then is now in its 18th printing. So
pretty
fun,
amazing.
special day.
And I know you love Marisol. I love Marisol. She's just such, really a wonderful role model for children that, she has this self-acceptance, the courage to be herself, solves her own problems. And yeah, just a terrific character. And I think, even when she has problems, she prevails. She finds a way to solve them herself, and she doesn't let other people's opinions stop her. So to switch gears a little bit, as I think you've all seen from the spreads that we showed, that the text in the books, all 3 books, are in both English and Spanish. So why was it important to you, Monica, to have the books be bilingual?
Well, I think it's always beautiful to have 2 languages side by side on the page. I consider myself a literacy activist, and I think having books in more than 1 language and in 2 languages, Spanish and English, the 2 languages I grew up with, and that so many people living within the United States speak, was honoring my history, so much history here, and allows for a multi-generational literacy experience. So like my grandfather, in Peru would not have spoken English. My mother spoke Spanish as a first language and English as a second. English is my first language, and I speak Spanish. It just allows everyone to share that experience of a story, of sharing story. And so cross-generational communication is one reason. Also to support English language learners in the classroom and in the library, because beautiful illustrations help contextualize the words that they're learning and might have a greater impact with the emotion and excitement of the story. So I always advocate for my books to be bilingual, and when they come out in English, I am excited because I then have the chance to advocate for them to come out either bilingually, as Waiting for the Biblioboro did, or in a second, in an all Spanish edition, as with my most recent picture books. So
I just you had asked me to explain what the background is to my.
Oh yes, because it was a surprise that I love.
So this background behind me is the end papers from the book. Yeah, there you go. And it's basically Marisol's drawings and you can see her mixed drawings where she puts in combines features of different creatures, animals, plants, flowers. And we've used this in all 3 books with different colors. So in case anybody was wondering what that was, that's what it is. So before COVID, when you were going out into the world and doing presentations in schools and libraries and conventions and everything else, and then since COVID, when you've been doing virtual visits, what kind of feedback have you gotten from children about Marisol and her adventures?
It has been one of the most gratifying experiences of my writing life and professional life. Whether it was one of the first times I was at a book festival presenting on her, and an Iranian American woman came up, and her European American husband, and she had tears in her eyes saying how glad she was that I wrote this book, whether I was at the Arequipa the International Book Festival in Peru in Arequipa, and a Scottish and Peruvian man came up with his children,
Wow.
so excited about it, to so many kids that aren't necessarily Latino, Latina, or Peruvian, even if they are European American, whatnot. They come up and they say, I am Marisol McDonald. Look at my socks, or they'll show me their exciting, their very fun outfits. They love being mismatched. It's like a lesson in not worrying for a moment. It's like, dressing up in a costume of creativity when they get to do that. So I've had such connection with children about this book, with children from multi-ethnic mixed race families, with children who feel themselves to be creative or artistic or nonconformist, to children who love animals, to children who maybe sometimes might be considered mischievous. I love it. I've had joyful moments, like I think it was chosen as a one book read, this book in Denver, and I don't have their names on the tip of my tongue, but librarians showed up. I think it was like 11 p.m. at night, dressed as Marisol McDonald. And so I thought, these lucky children, look at the sense of fun. They did it just for me and because they thought it was fun.
Right.
And so then sometimes schools have mismatch days, and it's just like a rainbow of self-expression that is sort of giving permission to be a Marisol McDonald, like not worry about necessarily what everyone thinks at every moment. So it has been very meaningful to me that children have connected with this book, very much so, and an honor. So
related to this, what do you hope children will take away from these stories? Because that's always what we aim for, to have some positive effect with our books on young children.
I suppose it's what I hope, girls and young women and middle-aged women like myself, although I heard a joke the other day. I hope I'm middle-aged. I guess I should say that, because then I'll get to live to be 100. But it's hard to be ourselves. I don't know about you, Louise, but I so often second guess myself if I'm too loud or too passionate, or make a choice that no one agrees with, but stick to it. So I guess I want to affirm to be more gentle, more trusting of ourselves. And for children, I think that means not to look outward only to others' opinions for a sense of self and self-esteem, but to trust that voice that is your sense of ethics, self-expression, and that, you can be, how can I say it? You can be in the right, at least in relation to your own choices and lives, even if every single person in the room disagrees with you or doesn't share your vision, to stick to that vision. Because I do wonder how many young girls or boys have dreams that aren't, pursued because of outside expectations. So I guess mostly, just like Marisol uses her creativity, I want children everywhere to be consoled, to be inspired, to imagine their own lives like Marisol is trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for some children that are different to accept themselves that way. And by having books like the Marisol books and other books that are out there now, it shows them that it's okay. And it does encourage them and gives them that impetus to say, okay, I can be myself, even if I'm not the same as everybody else. And I'm just as good as them because I'm honoring myself. And I think that's,
and that includes all sorts of diversity that we have in our lives, and of course, it's a little bit of a love letter for those children who somehow haven't felt enough or fully embraced by either of their diverse cultures.
That's true. Yeah, there's so much, our country is becoming more and more diverse as the days go by. And I think something like this is always going to be good for children who have a mixed heritage. Is there anything else about Marisol or the books or writing for children in general that you would like to say before we move on to some other things?
Just that I love this moment where in my this stage of writing, I get to meet so many children who dream about creative paths, like being a writer and artist, and that I get to work with so many newer emerging voices in publishing through various venues. So I think this is an exciting moment. I think it's important that we ask our librarians to bring in books from diverse books and from new creators, as well as honoring those of us who have been doing it for a long time.
I think it would be interesting if at any point you get the opportunity to meet a teenager or a young adult who first encountered Marisol when they were, 7, 8 years old, and the effect that the book had on them. I mean, that's happened with some of our older books, and I think that would be just, I don't know if you've had that experience yet.
That's what's so special about picture books. Well, I'm a fan. My preferred genre are to write to very young readers for all sorts of reasons, probably because books were such a comfort to me when I was very young. And they did help me imagine a life around words as an English professor, as a writer, as a journalist. But what I do love is that with picture books, it's almost like once teachers and librarians who I owe, they're the activists that put books in the hands of kids, honestly. They can keep introducing to each generation of kids. And I love that because beloved books of older sisters and older brothers and older children become their younger siblings' favorite books. And so, hopefully it goes on generationally, but certainly I haven't sensed I've sensed this book, speaking and connecting to an audience. It hasn't waned in a decade. And for that, I am immensely, immensely grateful.
So now I just want to go back to a screen share again. And just let everybody who is watching us know that these are some screenshots from the Lee and Low website, where we have a page for each book. You have a lot of information that can be helpful if you're using this in a teaching setting or even just reading to a child one-on-one. You have a synopsis of the story. You have a free teacher's guide to download. You have interviews with the author and the illustrator and other resources. And also, if you wish to purchase the book, there's the information about purchasing. So just got that plug in there. And then I think now we could look at the chat box and see if there's anything, questions, comments that we can address. So this first one's a good question. Where do you find yourself seeing Marisol in the next 10 years?
Well, I've never uttered this out loud publicly, but I've recently, and I don't know why, because I have all sorts of books on their way out, including my next one, speaking of plugs, with Lee and Low, which will be called The Turquoise Room, El Cuarto Turquesa, which is an homage to my real grandmother and mother and magical realism and creativity. But I've thought, I wonder where Marisol would be as a middle schooler or even as a tween, and wondered if that might be a place to expand and revisit her, since it's been quite a few years since I published the sort of bookend of the trilogy of picture books, Marisol McDonald, Il Monstro, The Monster, and Marisol McDonald and the Clash Bash. So who knows? Maybe she'll be revisited, because I've become very, very, very fond of chapter books, and or maybe she'd be revisited in middle grade, because I sure would love to let my readers grow with Marisol a little bit, so that readers that she inspired when they're in second grade might find her in 5th or 6th grade. Thanks, Yolimari. I see saying yes, please.
Let's see, okay. So, okay, in Marisol's vernacular, I guess, if Marisol were to give advice to young people about being themselves, what would she say? How would Marisol say it?
It's hard to be yourself. It really is sometimes. And I think we see this reflected in our personal lives and in our political worlds, that sometimes it's easy to conform or avoid or accommodate. There's many words and they're not all negative, rather than to cause any friction in our world, right? Or it's easy just to take the paths that offer the least resistance, but beautiful things can be had if you listen to that voice that is whispering the dreams, your dreams. And so I guess in a way, something I'm very proud of is when I was a young writer and I was getting lots of rejections for this manuscript, and that something I kept going. I did not change my vision for the book. And thanks to the vision that I met with someone else, it came out into the world.
Yeah. So I think we're pretty much wrapping up now. So I just wanted to share again our celebratory poster here. And I want to thank you, Monica, for, of course, creating the wonderful stories and creating Marisol, and for participating in this tea time talk. And also thank you to everyone who has tuned in. If you'd like, we're going to be celebrating Marisol's 10th anniversary all week. And so if you would like to join in the celebrations, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Lee and Lowe, and follow the hashtag Marisol is 10. So thank you again, Monica. Thank you to all the people who have tuned in, and have a good day.
Yes, thanks everyone.
And say hi to Marisol. Wish her a happy birthday.
Thanks.